Well, welcome again to another session of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. We're fortunate to have with us Jean Menderduck, who is Executive Director of the Center for Innovation and Research on Teaching at Grand Canyon University. Research focuses on enhancing student learning experiences in the online classroom through innovative instructional and assessment strategies or strategies for integrating efficient online instruction in a manner that maximizes student learning satisfaction and engagement. Sounds great. And we're fortunate we've had Jean present for us for a number of years, and it's always something really interesting and useful. So there I set you up, Jane. It's all yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm actually going to kick my camera off to save a little bandwidth, but I'll bring it back on at the end so we can chat a little bit as we're wrapping up. As you can tell by the title, today we're talking about AI, which is something that we're talking about pretty much across the board in higher education. And it's not really surprising when we think about how education has changed. There is literally not a statistic we can name over the last 2 years where we haven't seen increased AI use. So we're seeing all of us start to adopt it more. We're seeing faculty using AI related tools for their teaching. We're seeing AI being integrated not only into our courses, but into digital textbooks and into all of the other areas that our students are really interacting with content. And so, not surprisingly, in addition to all of these statistics, anything you can name related to student use, we've also seen an increase. So not surprisingly, students are using AI for assignments, students are using AI-powered tutoring systems, they're using AI to write things, they're using AI to study, and they are also violating academic integrity with AI. And we're all starting to get a little overwhelmed and a little bit frustrated. And I'm a psychologist by training, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross put out this theory about the stages of grief. And I think it's really interesting when we talk about her stages of grief in relationship to our response to this kind of AI acceptance. Because what we really have found over the last couple of years is a lot of educators started kind of in this denial mode. You know, AI is just a fad. It's not going to change anything. We're just going to keep doing what we do. And then students discovered AI. And all of a sudden, it felt like our entire world was about policing AI and academic integrity and detecting AI use. And everybody started to get so mad. At which point, we then move into the bargaining stage that it's like, okay, fine. If AI is not going anywhere and the students are going to use it, maybe if I start bringing it in, I can prevent their misuse and make it a little bit better. And then the depression kicks in. It's everywhere. And it's really, really hard to get a grasp on the impact of AI across virtually every aspect of education. And the minute you feel like you're on top of it and ready to go, they add new features and they change things and they start integrating it more. And we go back to the anger and the bargaining. Most of us, at least at times, though, have started to move into the acceptance stage. AI isn't going away. And so recognizing that, how do we really use it in a meaningful way? Now, as I say this, I'm going to guess that most of you can relate to all of these stages. And what we find is when we look at AI acceptance across faculty, it is definitely not a linear model. And so as you start to play with AI and bring it into your classroom, I think what you'll discover is you'll get really excited about the possibility and then oftentimes get frustrated because it didn't work out the way you wanted, or they changed the AI, or it's operating differently. But as we are going through these kind of stages of AI acceptance, there's one thing I want you to keep at the back of your mind. When we talk about good teaching and learning, AI actually changes nothing. Good teaching is good teaching. And there are hundreds of years of research about what good teaching looks like. And we know that good teaching is about having really good, clear learning objectives and creating an engaging and motivating experience where our students are involved and everybody gets a chance to be engaged with that content and they're actively learning and they're relating it to their life. And we're giving them guidance and we're giving them feedback and we're steering them in the right direction. All of these principles of good teaching do not change because of AI. AI changes nothing. But when we think about all of those principles of good teaching, herein lies the problem. As humans, we can only do so much. And in any given classroom, learning is a collective experience. And this is true both face-to-face and online. There's usually one teacher and a lot of students. And because of that, even though those good principles stay the same, we've had to adapt our strategies to deal with the fact that we're human. Even though I know that every student is going to maximize their learning if I can make it personally relevant to them and I can give them guidance and feedback that is directly relevant to what they're doing, I can't do that for 35 or 40 students at one time. I just can't, as a human, give every single one of them immediate feedback right now. And because of that, a lot of our implementation in higher education of these strategies have been adapted to the fact that that teaching is a collective experience. But AI is really starting to challenge that because AI cannot do anything that you can't do yourself, but it can do it faster. It can do it simultaneously for lots of people at one time. And because of that, it's changing everything. And I think once we kind of accept that reality, that good teaching is good teaching, and if we had unlimited time and attention as humans, we absolutely implement that. But we can't. And AI can. And that's where the power of AI really lies for helping us as a teacher to be more efficient and effective. Because AI can effortlessly and continuously align our learning objectives and assignments. It can revise rubrics and change them. As standards change, it can update everything and it can track that all the way down the line. It can create an environment where every single student can be interacting and getting exactly what they need for feedback and guidance and examples. It can identify where one person is struggling and giving them extra help, let other people move at a pace that matches their past learning. Generative AI simply allows us to do all the things that we've always known we needed to do, but in a realistic way. It simply is overcoming our limitations of being human. It has unlimited time, resources, and energy, and it can adapt to all the students at all times, which is why a lot of us are starting to accept AI because we're seeing the potential for what it can do in the classroom. And so I have a quick question for you here, and I want you just to answer this in the chat. On a scale from 1 to 5, right now, frequently are you using generative AI? And that might be something like ChatGPT, Bard, actually now it's Copilot, Gemini. How often are you using it? We have a few brand new ones. We've got several that are like very regularly. I will tell you right now, I am 5. I run with 3 monitors open on my computer when I'm working. And on one of my monitors, I always have ChatGPT open. Now, which AI am I talking about today? Honestly, it doesn't really matter. Lisa's with me. She always has it open on the computer. So what I'm talking about today, you'll hear me say ChatGPT just because that happens to be the generative AI that I use. But please know that it doesn't matter whether you like Gemini, Copilot, Claude, Perplexity, Poe. There are a number of really good generative AI programs, and everything that I'm going to mention today applies to all of them. And what we're really going to talk about is how can we tap into the efficiency of AI? What might that look like in our classrooms that really just let us implement those principles of good teaching for all of our students without going insane and taking up all of our time? And so I am going to start with the area that research tells us faculty spend, online faculty, I need to clarify, not face-to-face faculty, but online faculty spend the most time, grading and feedback. Research actually finds that for faculty teaching online, right now, they're spending about 60% of their teaching time on grading and feedback. And this is one of the areas that AI is absolutely phenomenal in allowing faculty to not only do it faster, but providing better feedback for students. And so let's go through some really specific ways that you might do this. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up on my screen here. Let's make that one smaller. We're going to pull up ChatGPT here, and we're just going to do some demonstrations here of this. The first thing is one that's often automated already in your learning management system. But if it's not, you can actually use AI to just help you go through those tasks where students maybe are writing out answers and doing it in a much more rapid fashion. So you could come to AI and you could simply tell it, I am going to upload student assignments one at a time, provide feedback on each to ensure that they accurately understand the relevant concepts. And then depending on what you're grading, you can actually give it and say, here are the key points, or here's the rubric that I have that I would like you to use for this. But I'm now going to upload the assignments. Now, as you do this, you can actually give it the kind of feedback that you want. So let's pretend here, and I actually ask a couple of my students for permission to utilize their examples here. I just come into my downloads and I can look at, here is one that my student said, yes, you have permission to use this. And I could open it up. And just notice here, all I've told it is I want you to accurately grade this, or not grade it, give feedback about this. And it's going to come in and it's going to say, okay, you gave a solid overview of the bystander effect. You effectively incorporated the following concepts. Here are some things you could improve on. Now, the other thing that happens, and research over the last year that we've been doing has told us, AI can give mountains of feedback. Students actually get overwhelmed by too much feedback. So then you can come in here and say, I want the feedback paragraph-based, concise, clear, and written at a level that the student can easily understand. And now after it, notice I haven't even given it any of the actual content. If I wanted to, I could have said, here are the key concepts that we're looking at. Here's what I want you to focus on. And I could have put all of that information in here. Now I can say, okay, that paragraph of feedback, I think a student would read that. So I would go through here. It talks about the victim effect. It says it's not well established. I would always quickly review the feedback, make sure it matches. And I would have read the student paper myself to ensure there's nothing I want to add. So I might come in here and I might say, add that they need to incorporate more research. So what I tend to do when I'm using it in this way is I will simultaneously upload the paper to AI while I'm reading it. And I will have mentally, as faculty, we do this all the time. I will have mentally already known what I want to say. Like, yep, they did good. This was accurate. They needed more research. And this one isn't actually in there. And then I will read through the feedback and I will just adjust it. And I will tell it, add this, subtract this, and then it will have that feedback for me that I can then move over to the classroom. Now, as I tell you this, I was actually hoping that some red flags would have gone up for some of you listening of like, ooh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. Did anybody have any red flags pop up in their mind? If so, put those in the chat. And if you didn't have a red flag, you should have. And I'll give you a minute to put it in the chat before I share the red flag. I'm not. Adding info to training. Yep. So one thing that we're concerned about is when we are using student papers that might have inaccurate information, using it in this way, we're actually adding to the training model, and we could be actually skewing the training model if a lot of our students have inaccurate information. So as Wendy said, one of the things we might want to worry about is, are we adding info to the training model? If you're wanting to use AI in this way and you're worried about that, one of the things that you can do is you can go into your own settings on AI. And so you would scroll down to your own. Oops, have they moved it somewhere? Maybe they've moved it over under our names. Yes, they've moved over their names. You can go into your settings. And if you're worried about that, you can actually change your settings so that you do not add into the model. And you can come into those settings. Is it under security? They move these around all the time. Let me check and we'll find it. Always find it. Archive chat, delete chats, log out, notifications. But anyway, you can come in here and right here, you can actually tell it, I don't want you to remember this information and to put it into the model, and you can turn that off. So if you don't want AI to be getting your information into the model, you can actually take that off. The other one that Anna mentioned was no rubric for it to reference. If you want to, you could upload a rubric in here and tell it to use that rubric. You can upload grading criteria and tell it to use it. The one that you haven't mentioned, and this is the one I want to caution you about before you use this technique, is your own university policies. Right now, different universities have taken different positions on how student papers, who owns the rights to those papers, and whether or not we can upload the papers to AI without student permission, and if we need to make them anonymous and take off the student names. So at my university, there is not a restriction. And what they have done is they've gone to a general statement where they tell students submissions you make at the university may be uploaded and that they will not be anonymous. But we do have to worry when we're talking about student papers. Do we have students' permission to upload their papers to AI? Do we need the students' permission to upload the papers to AI? And has the university made policy about that? So if you're teaching in an environment where they're like, you know what, we don't want you uploading student papers. We are not comfortable with putting that information into AI. We're not comfortable with that either adding to the model or potentially violating students' intellectual property. So there's a number of kind of question marks that are still floating out there in the world. Another strategy you can do, and this is another one I use a lot when I'm just quickly grading things, is as I'm reading the paper, I will literally talk to ChatGPT. So if you have the paid version, I'm not sure if the free version does it, there's this little button down here that's use voice mode. So then I can literally say, in here, I'll start a new chat so it knows we're doing something different here. And I'll tell it, I am going to give you my thoughts as I grade students' papers. Oops. I want you to assemble my thoughts into cohesive feedback. I can't type today. Cohesive feedback that I can give the student. And then I click it and I say, okay. And then it says, got it. Send me your thoughts. So then I could say, the student, oh, is it going to let me right now? Let's see if it'll let me while I'm using voice for allow this time. We'll see if it will let me okay, I can't actually demo this. I didn't think about that because I'm using my microphone to do the Zoom. But if I wasn't using my microphone to do the Zoom right now, I would just talk and I will literally just out loud as I read the paper and I'll say, student has a good understanding of the bystander effect. They didn't really explain victim effects well. They're not using proper APA citation. They did really good examples. And I will just rattle my thoughts as I'm grading. And then the voice will assemble that into a paragraph for me that I can grab and give to the student. So it just speeds up my ability to give them that information. You can also create feedback templates where you tell it specifically, like in this paper, I just want you to give really specific guidance on APA style, on grammar, on content, whatever it might be. but it allows you to really tailor that feedback to specific aspects of your learning objectives. You can also tell it exactly what you want it to do. So maybe on that last one, I could say, I only want you to give feedback on APA style, nothing on content. And then I could potentially upload a paper. I'll go to my downloads again, grab a different one. It's going to quickly read it. And you can actually tell it exactly where you want the detailed feedback on. You can also upload a rubric and you can simply say, go through this rubric and grade, not grade. I never use it to assign the grade, but I say use the rubric to give feedback in these targeted areas, telling the students where they should improve and where they shouldn't. Now, even notice here in this feedback that I grabbed on this paper, the paper that I uploaded was a 3-page paper, so it was not long. If I was doing this as a human grader, knowing that I have 45 papers to grade, chances are all I would say is double check your APA style on in-text citations and reference list. But I'm not going to have the time to go through and give them the very specific, like, here's what you said, but here's what it should have been. Here's what you said, here's what it should have been. So AI simply allows me to give that more detailed feedback in a much faster fashion. Outside of just grading and feedback, though, you can have it draft summative feedback. So perhaps you graded all the papers and you could just tell AI, you could say, I need a general feedback statement to give students holistically so that they can compare their performance in relation to others in the class. Tell them that everyone understood bystander effect, but give more information on victim effects so that everyone understands. Offer modern examples. And now I could take this feedback that it gives and I could upload it as an announcement to the class. And I could say, here's what everybody was doing well. Here were some things that people could have really improved on. And then I would say, go look at your individual feedback in the gradebook and compare it here so that you can have a sense of how you're doing. So you could ask it to do this as well. Now, within this, I also would encourage you to start making it sound like your voice. So if this is the way you write your announcements and you tend to give your feedback, leave it this way. For me, I tend to be much less formal. So then I could come back and say, make this more conversational and less formal. I tend to be pretty informal in my feedback. And then I'll tell it, but be professional. Because if I don't tell it to be professional, it starts to talk in slang and doing things that I would never do. The one thing that I love is after I have trained AI on like my style and the way I do it, I have to give it a lot less guidance. So the more I interact with it, the more it's going to start picking up my style. You can even go into your settings and you can change your settings and personalize it where you tell it, I tend to have an informal style. I tend to be casual in my conversation. Use this style whenever I'm asking you for course content or feedback, and you can tell it those things. Pretty much every aspect of my feedback now, I'm using AI to help me with, whether I'm telling it the information and it's expanding it for me, whether I'm asking it to look for themes, whether I'm even asking it to help me create or tweak the rubrics, or aligning my assignment direction with the rubrics to make sure that all of that is lined up in terms of me being able to give them really effective grading and feedback. Before I move on to the next area, I just want to briefly pause and ask if there's any questions or anything else you'd like me to demonstrate related to feedback. And if there's not, in the chat, you can just put good to go or give me a thumbs up or something to let me know that we're good to keep going forward. Yeah, Wendy, I've gotten to where I use the voice feedback a lot because I really am not sure where I stand personally on uploading students' papers. I waver and I go back and forth, but I feel really comfortable with the idea of doing voice feedback because I just read and talk out loud as I'm going, and then it makes it into nice, good quality feedback for the students. If you're going to use AI for grading and feedback, please make sure you're not simply bypassing the process of feedback. It's important that you're still involved, whether it's reviewing that feedback, but you shouldn't be just not reading the student's work and letting AI do that for you. You need it to just use it as an assistant to help you do that. So to have it help you, give it grading criteria, give it the rubrics, give it the assignment directions, and then be sure you're telling students how you're using AI. We wouldn't want to give students the impression that we're not reading their assignments and that we're not involved. But students are also really savvy users of AI, and they often can tell that it's AI generated feedback. So, what I tell my students is I use AI and I talk to AI. I'm the one reading your paper. I'm the one telling AI what to write. But you're right, AI is assembling that for you. So if you read that feedback and it feels like it has an AI vibe to it, it does. But please know it's me reading it and it's me giving AI the information. Not only does that transparency help to really maintain a good relationship in the classroom with your students, but it also helps to start model for students effective AI literacy. The idea that there's nothing wrong with using AI if we're using it as a tool to help us and not using it to bypass the processes that we're actually focusing on. So the next area, and I actually organized these topics based on where online faculty tend to spend their time. And what we find is after grading and feedback, the next big chunk of time is spent for online faculty in discussion boards. Talking to their students, interacting with their students, posting, responding to posts, trying to create really engaging questions for their discussions to get discussions moving. And here's the area that I literally use AI all day, every day. Because at times, after teaching the same class for 20 years, even though the discussion questions change and the topics change, it can be really hard for me to think not only of the main discussion questions, but like, how should I follow it up? What can I prompt to get more people engaged and to get them talking and to get it to be really, really relevant to them? So I will come to AI. And so I might say, I am facilitating a discussion on correlation coefficients, something not that exciting to discuss for students. I teach statistics, and this is one of the many topics in statistics that they can't stand. But I could say, I'm facilitating a discussion on correlation coefficients. I need really interesting and engaging discussion questions. Discussion, I can't spell. That will prompt critical thinking and understanding. These are college students. Give me ideas. And I just use it as brainstorming buddy. And I ask it to help me think of really good questions. I ask it to change it based on whether this is an undergraduate class or a graduate class, whether this is their first time dealing with it, their last time dealing with it. Here it says, think of two variables that are strongly correlated. So let's say I read that and I'm like, well, that's not that interesting. So I could actually stop it here and I could say, these questions aren't that engaging. Make them more interesting and relevant to a traditional college student. And now it's going to start to tailor it. And so I can have it really dive in. And let's say I liked the number 2 here, that I like the social media and health. I could even come back and say, I really like number 2. Let's dive deeper into that. Give me a list of engaging follow-up questions for this prompt. And so if I was going to be using that prompt and I was going to bring it into my classroom, it's still wanting to talk here, so I'm kind of waiting for it to finish brainstorming. Okay, so now I can say, I'm just going to pick one. I really liked number 2, but now if I give that to my students as my main prompt, what are some things I can do to follow up? So when I'm popping in there and kind of peppering it and trying to get the discussion rolling, that I can put in there. And it can give me examples that I can put in there. I can even come back here and say, what are some debates or counter arguments related to this topic? Something where I can play devil's advocate and get students to respond. And now it's just going to dive deeper. We're still onto the social media and mental health. So now it's like, okay, well, let's give you some places. So now I might even come into the discussion and say, class, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Let's assume social media isn't causing these health problems. It's just exposing everything that happens. Like, how would you respond to this? What do you think? And I could even come back and say, for each of these debates, give me engaging discussion prompts, discussion questions that I can pose to the class. And it is going to, oops, it was still brainstorming for me. I'll let it finish. I was rushing it. And now it can go in and even start giving me some more possible questions that I could use if I got in there. Now, in a discussion forum, it's not just a matter of us popping in there and giving questions. Sometimes we need to give content to them as well. So I could tell it with this topic in mind. And again, you would put in whatever topic, whatever prompt, whatever learning objective that you are working with. With this topic in mind, give me some short instructional paragraphs that I can share with students in the discussion to help them better understand the issue. And it will now help me generate some just kind of instructional things that I could pop in here. And it's going to stay on because in this discussion, I've told it I want to focus on issue number 2. So it's going to stay on the whole mental health correlation between social media and whatever. So let's say after it gives me a few of these, I would come back and say, now give several instructional posts that dive deeper into the specifics of correlation coefficients. And I can simply use AI to help me come up with the content. Now I'm going to go back to something I said right when we first started. AI can't do anything you can't do yourself. I absolutely understand correlation coefficients. I could brainstorm topics that college students might find interesting. I can brainstorm discussion questions. I can brainstorm follow-up discussion questions. I can write instructional posts, but I can't do it this quickly. And so by using AI to collaborate with me, the way I typically like to do it is AI help me brainstorm, and then I pick out the things and I interact with it and I tell it what I like and I tell it where I want to go deeper and I tell it how I want it to give me content that I can then share with my students. And again, we could come into this and we could say, well, let's, give it my voice, write in this tone. If you're using AI a lot, you can even upload a sample of your writing. So you might say, here's a sample of my writing. When I'm asking you to give me content, be sure that you do it using this kind of tone and style, because I really want it to have the flavor of my voice. And it can adjust it based on anything that you give it. You can also use it to do wrap-ups at the end. So let's imagine, I'll say we had a good discussion on this topic. Give me a summative wrap-up post. And it can now give me that post that I can then put in the classroom. Notice the point here isn't that I've turned the discussion over to AI. Rather, I've taken the topic and I've thought as a faculty member, what do I really need to do? I need to think about how I can make it personalized to my students. I need to give them really engaging content. I need to give them something they can relate it to. All of those good principles of teaching that we talked about. And AI can help me to do that in a matter of minutes. And before, when I would do this, and I would try to get good topics, I would try to get engaging questions, it might take me 30 minutes, 45 minutes. But if I can now save that 30 minutes and I can do it in 15 minutes, I can then reinvest that saved time into other aspects of my teaching. So the point is not turn it over to AI, but rather use AI to help you do the things you want to do. If you read a student's post and you're like, oh yeah, but they need to whatever, turn on the voice button and tell it, say, I'm going to be, you could actually go to AI and you can say, I am in the process of facilitating an online discussion. I'm not even going to bother to change my spelling. It knows what I'm talking about. I am going to use voice to tell you what I want to post. Create the posts for me. And it will say, all right, go ahead and go. So I might start it and tell it I'm going to be in a discussion forum, and then I'll open the discussion forum. And as I read a student's post, I'll just hit the voice button and I'll say, you know, that's true, but you didn't consider this and you really need to dive deeper into, and I'll just talk, and then AI will write it for me, and then I'll copy it back into the classroom for the students. If you're going to do this, what I would really encourage you to do is just kind of set some guidelines. Give your students ideas about how to use it. Not only can you use it, but you can go to your students and say, you know, sometimes the discussions get really dry because you approach this as an essay and you're worried about your writing and your APA style and your communication. But I don't want to deal with that in this discussion forum. I want you to think and I want you to talk. And so I'm going to actually encourage you to use AI and tell your students, just talk to AI. Let it compose it for you, but don't have it create the ideas for you. Just let it be the writing buddy to take your thoughts and put it out there for you so that you can spend more time thinking and less time learning about writing. The goal is to use AI to really supplement. It's not that you're not going to be actively participating. It actually lets me participate more actively and with better, higher quality engagement with my students, because it's taking what's happening in my brain and letting me implement it for my students. Any thoughts, questions, or comments on using AI to help with discussion facilitation? If not, I'm just going to keep trucking. If a question does pop up, go ahead and jump into the chat with it at any time. The other area, and I've already really kind of touched on this as we've been going through this, is just using AI for general content development. As Wendy said, so often AI just comes up with things we didn't think of. It helps us to relate to students, to take different perspectives, to develop content that we maybe didn't have time to develop before. And so one of the things that we all struggle with is like syllabi and getting students to read the syllabi. I actually now every semester take my syllabus and I upload it to AI and I say, give the key points. And then I tell students, you absolutely should read the syllabus. And then after you read it and you file it away and you forget everything that was in it, here are the key points that you need to keep in mind. So you could come in here and you could simply say, I am going to upload a syllabus. Give me the main key points that a student needs to take from this. And then let me see if I can quickly find a syllabus for you. Ignore how disastrous my file structure is. We're just going to pretend that it's not disastrous. I'm going to go down to one that I know I just created not that long ago. Let's go into this one. And we should have a syllabus. There we go. And you can just upload your syllabus and you could say, what are the key points? And it can give you that key points. If you're having to start from scratch, you can say, give me an outline to create a syllabus. You could actually go through and say, could you rewrite this for me to make it that is more easily understood for students? So that syllabus that I uploaded is actually 7 pages. And it's now going to take those 7 pages and it's going to say, here's the Cliff Note version. Here's the things you need to remember. Late work not accepted. You can expect a response within 2 days. AI work strictly prohibited unless I tell you otherwise. If I do suspect it, you have to meet with me via Zoom and show your knowledge. But it took that big syllabus and it boiled it down into this. So now I tell students, here's the big thing, read closely, but here's the key points that you need to keep in mind. The other thing you can do is I could say, with this syllabus in mind, give me a new version of the policies that are more student friendly. So I can ask it to change the policies, and it's just changing the rewording. It's not changing the policies itself, but it's just rewording it to try to be more student friendly. You can ask it to explain assignments better for you. The one thing that I use it for every semester, and I laugh because it felt life-changing because it was the thing I hated doing, updating the dates. At the end of my syllabus, there is a whole big calendar of all of their due dates. And so it says, first post to the discussion board this day, and then your quizzes due this day, and your assignments due this day. Well, then the next semester, I have to get out a calendar and go through the calendar and figure out. Now I upload my syllabus and I say, upload, change the dates for a course that starts on this day and ends on this date, and give me the new Word version with all the updated dates. And it adjusts it. And then I can say, the university added a spring break, take a week, change the due dates. And I don't have to sit there and go through a calendar and do all of those things. Pretty much any content that you can think that you might be developing, AI can just help you do it faster. So you can use it to brainstorm out lecture notes. It can brainstorm out summaries. It can brainstorm out key points. I don't tend to have scripts when I lecture, but I do often want to make sure I hit key points. So I could come in here and say, I'm creating a lecture on, let's say, Erickson's theory of development, something very well known. Give me the key points to include in my lecture. And it can just go through and it can give me the key points. I could then ask it to give me some examples. I could even come in and say, create a resource list for websites that I want to include on there, use this lecture, create a glossary, use my notes and create questions for the students. Give me a concept summary, give me a diagram. I can literally ask it to quickly whip up anything I would want to include in my lecture. Now, it's not that I don't understand Erickson. I would never come to AI and have it create a lecture on a topic I don't know. But as long as you know the content to be able to read through and be like, okay, yep. Like on this one, if I was reading through it, it says, Erickson has 8 stages. I actually know recently there has been a 9th stage proposed. Talk about that. And I can now come in and it's just going to say like, oh, okay, yeah, let me add to that. So it's, again, not that you're not going to think, it's just going to create it faster and you can read through what it creates faster than you can type it out yourself. And then you can ask it to update, to revise, to change, to add things in. I could say, give me a glossary of keywords to share with students on this theory. It's still going into depth on Erickson, so then it would come back. I can ask it to give me a student-centered summary. I could ask it to create a worksheet. I could ask it to create a matching game. Anything that I could do going back to our principles of good teaching, active learning, student-centered learning. So anything I can think of to make it more active, more engaging, more student-centered, more exploratory, more hands-on, I can ask it to do that. Now, let's say that I was doing this and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know what's good. I could simply ask it, brainstorm active hands-on learning activities that I can use with students for this topic. Oops, let me get to the end. Is it still brainstorming? Nope, now I'm just going to change. And it could now brainstorm for me. So let's say I was like, okay, I don't know what I want to do. And let's say it's coming up with this really good kind of activity here. And I could let it brainstorm. I'm going to actually stop its brainstorming. And I could even tell it, I want to have students use AI while doing an activity on this topic. Brainstorm ideas. And it's now going to think about like, okay, how could we do AI integrated activities or assignments that are related to Erikson's theory? So it's now going to brainstorm those out. Let's pretend that as it brainstormed them out, that I read them and I was like, okay, I really love blank. I'm going to pretend here that we want to do number one. And I will say, I want to do number one. Give me the full assignment directions and a grading rubric. And I'm going to stop its brainstorming so I can just let it do the next thing. And it now can just help me develop all of those things. Generally speaking, I always say what it spits out first draft is exactly that. It's a first draft. And you can either take it on your own and adjust it and, modify it, or you could just tell AI what you want it to modify. Or if you really like to be fancy, you could tell AI you want to move it into a canvas. Move this into a canvas so we can collaborate on it. And I'm going to stop it. And if you tell it to move it into a canvas, it's actually going to open up ChatGPT's Canvas version. And so what that means is now when I click on that, rather than me having to just prompt and go back and forth, we can actually collaborate together right here in the document. And so I could come in here. I'm finished, but I'll go ahead and stop it and we'll see if it'll let me collaborate. Oops, because I stopped it, it didn't move it to the canvas. Let me say, I'll say redo. Let me open this up so we can see the full thing. Redo in Canvas. And it's going to open up that canvas. It's a canvas because it goes into this little thing here. I can actually tell it to go ahead and open in the canvas. I think I have to let it stop there. But once you're in Canvas, you now kind of collaborate with it right here without prompting. So you can go in and change the wording. You can right there in the line, ask it to redo things. And it can become a really collaborative way that you can develop those materials. From here, I could say, okay, give me some discussion prompts, give me a summary, give me, whatever materials I could possibly want students to use here. I could now just ask it to create that for me. I'll give it a minute here and I'll ask you in the chat. Have you guys used Canvas in ChatGPT? Do you want me to show you Canvas and let it keep going, or do you want me to just keep on moving? I'll let you share in chat while I let it think. Okay, Wendy says she'd like to see it in Canvas. So we'll let Canvas finish talking here since stopping it made it mad and wouldn't let it work. And I'm just going to expand this out over the whole window once. But so once you're in Canvas, this is what it looks like. And you can still use your prompts that are now off to the left-hand menu. But let's say I come up here and I'm like, oh, I don't want them to use an AI chatbot. I want them to actually use ChatGPT. So notice now this is their output, but I can come in and just change that output. So now I am typing right there with it. So I don't have to just go to the prompt and tell it, change this, do this. I can do it right here. Or I can say over here, this little arrow will pop up. I can say, change this question. So you can use it much more interactively in the Canvas like it's a Word document. So you can type into it, you can tell it exactly where you want things to change, you can tell it what you want to update. So regardless of how you're, using AI and which AI tool you choose to use, I think the key that you want to remember is pretty much everything we could want to do to help our students, if we can think of it, AI can implement it. So we can now give them study guides. We can work on simplifying the language. We can give them translations. We can give them alternate formats. As long as we're willing to collaborate, review, and stay involved with the AI, the possibilities are endless. We can use it to create answers to emails, to common questions, to translate with non-native speakers, to summarize, to answer questions. We can teach our students how to use it. This is one of the things I do in all my courses now, is I tell students, if you're unsure and you don't understand, go into AI and tell AI, help me understand this better. Give me quiz questions on this and let me answer them and correct my understanding. If you need resources, I'm teaching my students how to use AI as their own personal tutor so that they can have their own support, and it starts to have them understand AI literacy and being really good consumers of information, talking to them about verifying the information and staying involved and being responsible with their use. I truly believe possibilities are endless. And the more we can save that time, the more we can open it up to interact in really meaningful ways with our students. And so once you can start saving that time, you can start brainstorming. What would you do? And how can AI free up that time to let you do that? We are actually completely out of time. I gave way too many examples. Sorry about that. So I didn't leave any time for questions, I don't believe, Bob. I think we need to close up so you can get your next window open. Is that correct? But what I will do is I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if anybody has a question or a comment and they would like to follow up and talk about it more, feel free to reach out to me and we can continue the conversation.
Oh, I tell you, we could go on for another hour or so, but
We could. I could talk about AI all day.
yeah, I think if people have some good things to try out. Um, Dean, as always, you do presentations that I love. They're always something good, useful that I can, do something with.
Good.
Well, I'm going to stop the